The idea that a stranger is reading something to call me a jerk is incredible. That blows me away.
Welcome to Log Off. Everyone has an internet story to tell, and today we're hearing from Will Leitch. Will founded the influential sports blog Deadspin in 2005, but he's far more prolific and eclectic than just that. Among many other things, he's a contributing editor to New York Magazine, a national correspondent for MLB.com, the co-host of podcasts about movies, St. Louis Cardinals baseball, and Georgia football. And he's also the author of 6 books, including the Edgar Award-nominated How Lucky and last year's The Time Has Come. I'm excited to talk to him about as much of that as we can cover. But first, Will, let's start this podcast the way we always do at the beginning. What is your earliest internet memory?
So I was born in 1975. Thank you for having me, by the way. And I was born in 1975. And so I had no internet in high school. My first internet experience was at the University of Illinois, where I went to college, where Gawker was invented, and Mark Andreessen made Netscape there, Netscape Navigator. I think it was using the Netscape Navigator browser. And we were informed by the university that we had access to this thing called the World Wide Web and an email address, which I believe was w-leach@uiuc.edu. And I remember seeing it probably with a box of wine to my side and thought, boy, what a complete waste of time this is. Why would anyone use this? And then I did not use the internet really at all until my senior year of college. And that was really just to email my friends that were across the country. And of course, my favorite thing about email at that time is I didn't have a computer at home. So I would go to like either my office or like the web cafe, and I would email like once a week, which was a little bit like emailing like you were from the Civil War. Like, I do not know when I will be able to come back to return to speak to you again. And the letters were long and they were like 2,000 word emails, and they would get them a week later, and my entire life was different by the time that they got there. So that was my first experience, was sending letters, emails into the void for my friends that lived in other places, assuming they'd never see them. And if they did, don't waste your time. The world's out there. Why would you be looking at a computer, you doofus?
So once you got past the email stage and you started actually browsing, what kind of stuff did you start looking at? Was it sports scores and the typical stuff that fans like you do?
The fun for me was, I'm from a very small town in rural Illinois. And the example I was using is I grew up a fan of the Arizona football Cardinals, and which you could not buy any merchandise. And I knew of the Arizona Cardinals in rural Illinois, and I had no friends that were Arizona Cardinals fans. So for me, I felt like I was the only one that existed in the world. And I feel like a lot of my interests growing up, I felt like I was the only person that had those things. And so for me, the internet was amazing. I couldn't believe, like, there was a news group called alt.fan.tarantino. There were like tons of Quentin Tarantino fans in like Australia. I like corresponded with one of them, I assume, who was sitting next to a kangaroo. It was incredible to me that you could. So I went to like fan groups of things that I at the time thought were quite obscure, that of course turned out to be much farther universal. So I think I was on a Tarantino fan group, like a Nirvana bootleg fan group, and of course an Arizona Cardinals fan group. That one was the least active of the three, but certainly that's how I remember news groups the most. That was where I went to, because that was what's exciting to me, was to be able to, and to me is still kind of the unrequited love that I would like to have for the internet, is the idea of connecting with people that I do not know and would never be able to meet otherwise. That was what was exciting for me. And so that's how I spent most of my time, was talking to kangaroos about Quentin Tarantino, as one does.
So when did you actually start creating and publishing online?
I graduated from college in 1997 and worked for a magazine called the National College Magazine. And they just know that if a story didn't make it in the magazine, it would go on our website, whatever that was. And so occasionally someone would put that up on the website, and I would never even know it existed. And then I was a 1-year job, and then I went to moved to St. Louis and worked for the Sporting News Online, which basically this was a time where most of their web traffic was actually through AOL. And I don't mean like you through AOL accounts. If anyone that's been online for a long time will remember, when you logged onto AOL, you did not go straight to the web. Mm-hmm. You went to this weird little front page where things scrolled in little bubble windows, and you used something called Rain Man script. And so my job, because I was the lowest person on the totem pole at the Sporting News, was to wait for like the Trailblazers Sonics game to get over at 1:30 in the morning Central Time and load into the headline using Rain Man script and write a one sentence headline with a score. And I was like, okay, wow, this is amazing. I can find out the score of this game immediately. I wonder if there's some future in this. And so that for me was what was exciting, though, because I was not able to break into the writing for the Sporting News magazine because people had been there for years. Bill Simmons always talks about this, the idea that one of the reasons he started writing online was because he knew he was never the people at the Boston Herald were never going to die. So he was never going to be able to write for those places. And so therefore, going to the internet, to me, what was exciting about the internet was not so much that I could put whatever I wanted, but I could write as long as I wanted to. Anytime I wrote anything, everyone was constantly telling me, you have 400 words or 7 column inches or whatever it was. For me, I could write as long as I could. And so the fun of the Sporting News Online for me was like, the people that ran the magazine didn't quite realize what the web was. So I would write these like 7,000 word baseball columns that like they had, like, I don't think they even knew existed. We're like the only thing trafficked on the site at all. And they didn't even know it was there because it wasn't in the magazine. So that's what was exciting for me, was to be able to make things as long and make them however I wanted. I'm glad those sites are dead now, so no one can find those things because I think they're probably not very good. But to me, they were amazing. The freedom of it was really kind of remarkable.
I think you finally or eventually came on my radar at the Black Table with your Life as a Loser column. Mm-hmm. Was there anything that came before that?
Yes, there was a site called Iron Minds, which was a coworker of mine at the Sporting News named Andy Wong, who actually was like really into the web and really was kind of my gateway drug into the web. He had a site called Impression that eventually became Iron Minds. And he basically said, hey, I heard you. My email address at the time was filmcritic@hotmail.com. I did not save it, so I'm assuming someone else has it now. I have a valuable community, those handles at hotmail.com. Yeah. But so he saw my handle. He's like, oh, do you like movies? I'm like, yes. He's like, well, I'm not going to pay you. Obviously, we don't do that here, but you can write whatever you want. And I started writing for movie reviews for Iron Minds all of the time. And then because I was so kind of obsessed with making stuff, I became the managing editor of the site. Again, I'm saying managing editor as if like there was a union and you got promoted, like it was a made up title. But what happened was Iron Minds was not popular, but it was so early. It was like 1998, 1999, kind of so early in the web community that when the .com boom happened in like 1999 and 2000, a company called Novix Media, which was actually founded by JFK Jr. before he returned to reveal that he was Trump and was coming back and make all the cute people happy. Back before that happened, and when he was alive, because he founded George Magazine, and his web play was something called Novix Media. And so they saw Iron Minds, hired me and Andy, and we hired a staff of people to move to New York City and produce the, quote, MTV for the web generation. It basically went the way of pets.com and Cosmo.com and all of those. But it got me to move to New York. And so, and ever since then, that limitless possibility of the web, it feels like the web, this thing has actually gotten smaller and crankier since then. But the love that I still have for the notion of writing online and being able to make things exactly the way that you want them and communicate with people that you would not know before. That's really where I got that. And I always try to remember that excitement of like when people, sometimes I'll write something now and someone will be like, oh man, those comments beneath your piece were so mean. Are you okay? And I'm like, dude, I used to write like 5,000 words about like American Beauty that nobody read, nobody commented on. I couldn't get anyone of my friends or family to read them. The idea that a stranger is reading something to call me a jerk is incredible. That blows me away. And I always try to remember what that early time was like.
That is such a healthy mentality. I wish we all could have that, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Honestly, I think it's important because I know, and maybe this is coming from like a small town, right? Like for me, like, being from a small town, I didn't grow up with the idea that like, oh man, I'm going to go to Syracuse. I'm going to study journalism and I'm going to I'm going to go to Vassar or wherever the hell. And, like the idea of like being published Roger Ebert, who's one of my writing heroes, I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit,
Sure.
has one of my favorite lines. He worked at the Daily Illini, like I worked at the Daily Illini, obviously years later. And he said when he went to the Daily Illini, he learned his 3 favorite words in the English language. By Roger Ebert. And I always kind of love that. It's about like, it sounds egotistical, but what it really means is like falling in love with the act of creation and making things and putting things out in the world. The idea that like I wrote a piece for New York Magazine today that started with a blank page. There was nothing there. And I made it and it's out there and it's in the world and people can comment on it. People can hate it. People can like it. It doesn't really matter. I got to make it. I got to connect. People got to see it that don't know me and would have never come across me before. That's still exciting for me. And so I think that's why I'm able to remain still productive is because that excitement of Iron Minds, of the Black Table, of people like, hey kids, let's put on a play. Yeah. Like that kind of thing is, I think, really important, kind of an important thing to hang on to, even as I approach middle age. Let's go with approach middle age.
Perfect. That's a great segue, the creating something from nothing, because I was just about to ask about the Deadspin origin story. Can you take us through how that got started?
Yeah, so I had done a site called The Black Table, blacktable.com, which was with basically it was 3 fellow underemployed 20-something journalists in New York City. We were all working crap jobs. I was answering phones at the doctor's office when we started the Black Table, and we all moved to New York to try to make it big. My web thing dropped and blew up, and so we all feel like we all moved there to try to create and make things and be exciting and be like these hungry young creative journalists, and no one would hire us, and so we just decided, let's just make our own site. So we made our site called The Black Table. There was 4 people. And I always find this funny because now there's the 3 people were Eric Gillen, who basically is head of products for Hearst or something now. I don't know, something businessy. But he's doing very well. Aileen Gallagher, who's a journalism professor at Syracuse, and AJ Delario, who took over for me at Deadspin. And then I don't remember what happened after that. But at a certain level, AJ is still one of my closest friends. I'm joking, of course. But the point is that we were all kind of like frustrated. So we decided to make our own thing. And it wasn't really popular, but it was popular with like the right people in New York. It was kind of funny. It was irreverent. It was original. And this was right around the time that Gawker was launched, and Gawker was starting to get like some real traction among like the media community, and they were also just looking for stuff to link to, and we were not the Washington Post or the New York Times, and we were making things, and so they kind of saw my work, and I used to write some sports stuff for them, and so they actually came to me and said, hey, so listen, Nick Denton, just got offered by Bodog.com. I don't remember Bodog.com. They were a gambling site before gambling was fully legal. And they wanted to do a 6-month pop-up site about gambling. And they asked me if I wanted to do it. And I said, actually, I think gambling about sports is bad. Gambling's bad for the soul. And it'll never work. No one will ever care about gambling. Totally proven correct on that one. And so they basically asked, so I said, I don't think you should do a gambling site. But while I have you, I actually think you guys should do like a Gawker for sports. I think there's like a ton of great stories that you guys should do there. And they said, yeah, we've heard someone wanted to do that one time and it didn't work. So if you want to write a pitch, go ahead. So I basically just wrote like now what's kind of an infamous like 5-page memo. Because again, I was very underemployed. I was desperate to try to this kind of seemed like my chance. So this long memo of basically the idea of how I wanted to bridge the gap between the people that worked in sports and the people that consumed sports, the fans. Mm-hmm. And there always seemed to be a very clear wall between those things. As someone that had worked in journalism, but really considered myself much more of a sports fan than a sports writer, I thought that would be a strike zone in the middle to be able to try that and tell the stories. I had a bunch of friends that were sports reporters, and they would tell me, like, oh my gosh, there's this awesome story. And they would tell me the story about an athlete or the story behind the scenes. I'm like, oh, when's that going to be in the paper? And they're like, I would never write that in the paper. I'm like, I wonder if there's a place to publish those stories. And so I kind of pitched that whole idea. They looked at it, Gawker and Lockhart Steele, who was the managing editor at the time, and Nick looked at it and said, hey, this is a great idea. No one knows who you are, so we're going to give it to someone who knows who has a name, and you can assist that person. And I was so desperate, I was like, sure, fine. So they asked Bill Simmons, they asked Dan Shanoff, they asked Jonah Carey, if we're thinking of going from like dark names from the recent times, and they all turned it down. And so they came to me and said, okay, you're cheap, and if this thing doesn't work, no one knows who you are anyway. And so 6 months, and that's how I became Deadspin. And it really, I've always felt like I had the benefit with Deadspin. It was just mine. Like I got to do it. It was entirely mine. I never looked at traffic numbers. So therefore I was able to do the site the way that I wanted to do it. And it really felt like this was my chance to finally, like I was struggling. I was 30 years old when Deadspin started. Like I was not some young, cool kid. And so it really felt like the last chance for me. So I decided I'm going to do this exactly how I'd like to do it, and not let anyone in the world stop me from doing it the way I want to do it. And if it doesn't work, whatever, maybe someone from New York Magazine or the New York Times will see it and hire me to write a story for them or something. And so because of that, and also, no one at Gawker knew anything about sports. So they didn't really know what I was doing. And so while I wasn't looking at traffic numbers, they were, and they could see it kind of building up an audience. The famous story about that is Nick Denton once texted me. He had heard that the NCAA tournament was popular. So he once sent me something. He didn't text me. He sent me an AOL instant message. Make sure that's more accurate. So an AOL instant message saying, "Hey, Will, I wanted to ask, is the March Madness, is it over?" And I was like, "Well, it's July." So yes, yes, it is in fact over now. So for me, having that advantage of not having to appeal to a traffic board, not having to make, how are our numbers? Do we have any quick viral hits? This was so early on in the idea that the site could kind of be almost kind of my personal art project and kind of be the way I wanted it to be. And I really think that helped because I think people recognize I wasn't trying to sell them anything. I wasn't trying to trick them into reading the site. I was able to, my headlines were always esoteric and weird. I remember I did a post remember when Adam Morrison in the Gonzaga game where he cried, the game where Gus Johnson lost his mind, and Morrison started crying at the end of the game. And I literally put the headline of that piece was, "It gets the feelings out." That was just a headline, not SEO friendly, but anyone that got the joke and thought it was funny. And that was what the site was about. The site was not about getting big hits or athlete photos. The idea was finding other smart people who thought about sports the way that I think fans actually thought and still do kind of think about sports, and trying to find a community for it.
So I don't know if I'm just perfectly in the Venn diagram because I was a Gawker fan and a sports fan, but it really felt like it did take off right from the beginning. Was there a specific moment you remember where you're like, all right, this thing has legs. I'm not going to go back to being underemployed, as you put it.
I will never go back to not worrying that I'm going to go underemployed, to be entirely clear. But I certainly think that there was, there were two really moments in the early days. One was someone was at a bar partying with Kyle Orton, the then quarterback for the Chicago Bears. And Orton was having a great time. And he had like a bottle of Jack and a beer in his hand. He was partying, spilling on his shirt. And so they sent me the picture like, "Hey, me and my buddy Kyle are having a great time." And so, the thing that is important to remember about this piece, not only was this not meant to embarrass him, they were like, "Oh my God, you have to post this, dude. We're having a great time." Because they were readers of Deadspin. And so the headline was "Bear Down, Chicago Bear." And it became like a really big thing. And I think for a long time, because people in sports media were freaked out with the fact that this thing existed, because also this was happening at the same time that the newspaper industry was starting to have struggles that had absolutely nothing to do with Deadspin whatsoever. But I think that it became people tried to make it like I was like paparazzi and like jumping out of bushes at people or something. And I remember that got around a bunch of people thought, because he was the starting quarterback for the Bears at the time. And I remember he got asked at practice the next day about it. And he was like, "Yeah, it's hilarious, man. What? It was an off day. It wasn't the day before the game. What's the big deal?" That seems kind of funny now as all the internet has changed so much in that time. But like that was the spirit of the idea. It was Orton and his buddy thought that would be humanizing and funny, which it was, and it was. Mm-hmm. And so that got big. And then I think the other thing is we had actually, I had a reporter friend of mine who had gotten word of a player that had been suspended for PEDs. Now, this was by the time where a player gets suspended for PEDs and it wouldn't even make the news. He would just be off for like 6 games or something because it was before such a huge scandal. I think it was HGH was what it was. And so he kind of texted me like, "Hey, just so you know, here's the thing." So I published it on the site, and all of a sudden on the ESPN crawl, it said Deadspin. It was Matt Lawton, I think was the player who Deadspin reports Matt Lawton. I was like, "Oh my God, I made the TV happen. That's weird." I'm just sitting here typing on my computer and I made the TV happen. So that was those moments moments kind of spun out. And after that point, that's when it started to be seen as a threat to people. And that was very strange to me. It seemed very odd to me because I always thought the site was written in a certain good cheer and a certain friendliness and a certain warmth and community. And so the idea that it would be seen as a threat was, to be honest, quite confusing and bewildering to me. Though I would learn quickly that was the case.
One of your Deadspin posts that has stuck with me over the years, that it had nothing to do with sports. It's just humanizing and relatable. I think it touched on a level of posting regret that is more common than most people realize outside of their own experience. It's titled "My Roger Ebert Story." It's about your hero. It's from 2010 when he was post surgeries and getting all the flowers he deserved. Would you mind telling that story for anyone who missed it?
Yeah, so Roger Ebert was not only my hero in growing up, and one of the main reasons I went to the University of Illinois, because I grew up in, as I said, a town called Mattoon, Illinois, which is about an hour south of Champaign, and he was from Urbana. And I remember watching one of these, like on the movies was Ebert. I remember watching him on like WAND Decatur, Illinois television, which of course his show was syndicated across the country. I was like, wait, this guy is just smart. He wasn't necessarily telegenic, but he's smart, he's funny, and he gets to be on television talking about whatever he thinks. Whatever this guy's doing, and he got the hell out of Central Illinois. So I really wanted to be Roger Ebert very badly. So I was like, what do you do? He's studying journalism. Right, I'm going to go study journalism in Illinois. So I kind of followed him there. Ebert was, even at the height of his popularity, loved the Daily Illini. He loved the student newspaper. He credited it, like frankly I do, to almost anything that happened to him afterwards. His work ethic, his love of the business, love of writing, and so he would come back every year and meet with all of the students and meet with the students of the Daily Illini. I was a film critic. I was the most prominent name in the paper because I wrote constantly. So we got to know each other, and he became my mentor. And he actually helped set me up with some writing gigs in the Chicago area. And he gave me tips, and he was wonderful. He was all I could have possibly asked to have done. But, I moved to New York about 7 years later. I would move to New York, and, this was in the .com age, and we were all kind of like, old media, screw you, old media. We are ready to take over. I act like I had like a spiked collar and a leather jacket or something. I still had like a center part and a Cardinals hat. But nevertheless, like it was kind of this like kill your idols sort of time. Like the new media is here. So he had written, I felt, and I think, I wouldn't necessarily, I came by the opinion, honestly, even if I think I was wrong, but it felt like he was doing more concentration on television stuff than his writing, which for me was the reason Ebert was so great in the first place. And so I wrote a piece saying, I'm sick of Roger Ebert's fat effing face. And it was meant to be funny. It was not meant to say he's fat and he's stupid. But the idea of it was, I'd like him to get back to writing. And of course, the headline was that. And it got on Jim Romanesco's Media News, which was this very well-read blog, and it got everywhere. And so Ebert saw it. I had not talked to him in a couple of years by that point. He saw it and sent me just the sweetest possible notes that you could possibly send to someone just said that they were sick of your fat effing face. And I always thought about it, and I always felt bad about it. But then, at a certain level, we didn't really stay in touch because why would he stay in touch with the guy that did that? And so, meanwhile, in between that time, Deadspin came, and my career started to kind of get going, and I had a little bit more renown, and we kind of reconnected and got to know each other a little bit. And so then after he had his illness and had his surgery and been on Oprah and everyone was kind of finally doing that, I finally kind of fessed up and wrote my Roger Ebert story piece. And it was about Ebert's forgiveness, but really in a lot of ways is about the things that we write when we are young, that we believe in our youth, the fervidness of youth and the intensity and the certainty that we are right. And as you get older, you realize, I know now why I was doing that. and kind of like talking about that idea and fessing up to a pretty shitty thing that I did. And Ebert was very forgiving with that too, and always very wonderful. And I hear a lot about that piece because I think a lot of people can relate to that, particularly as we get older on the web and we have these long histories with the web. The idea of things that we were certain we were right on when we were 23, when we are approaching middle age, we look back to those things and think, what a jerk I was. I had no idea what I was talking about. And I try to remember that, not only to remember that people when they're young say a lot of things they don't mean or will some days look back on and regret, but also there's a purity to their thought. There's a purity of it. Like now there are things that I think that I'm like, okay, I'm approaching middle age. This is not a smart thing to say. It doesn't benefit me to say this. I'm going to hurt someone's feelings. There's a truth and a purity of when you were young that I do feel like that older people should also have respect for, even if we're like, idiot, you're going to totally regret that in 15 years. And I think there's value in that. And I try to kind of capture that in the piece.
Yeah, you definitely did. I mean, I have stuff from 15 months ago I regret, let alone 15 years ago.
I have stuff from this morning. Yeah, there's no question. But when I sent it, I was certain that I was right. Exactly. So I have no doubt that
it's a sign of maturity, Will. Deadspin has, you also have like kind of like a coaching tree phenomenon going on. There's quite a few blogs respond from it. I hired Matt Ufford out of the comments to launch with Leather in 2006. That would become Up Rock Sports. A lot of writers got their start on the site. What's it been like watching people go from basically telling dick jokes in the comments to having successful mainstream careers?
I mean, it's just getting older and growing up, right? At a certain level, I think that I would say this. I would say that is not strange. What is strange, and I would argue quite sad, are to see people that never adjusted. At a certain level, you're a middle-aged guy screaming hot takes into your phone like you're a 24-year-old for clout. That to me seems sad. It strikes me as sad. No matter what sort of financial success that you have, I always joke that we've lived long enough to see my favorite bloggers, my favorite niche bloggers from back in the day, hawking gambling tips at me and desperately trying to hang on as much as they can. And whatever, I get it. Everyone's got to survive. Everyone's got to do what they got to do. I'm not begrudging anybody, but at a certain level, you're supposed to evolve in life. You're supposed to grow up in life, and I think that what you can respect the purity of and the urgency of being absolutely certain that you are right when you are young, while also recognizing, okay, I'm going to move in this direction now. I'm going to try it this direction now. The idea that I would be writing novels about people with disabilities or writing a sincere notions about sexual assault on campus is not something I would have imagined when I was doing Deadspin. But I'm not doing Deadspin anymore. That was 16 years ago. And I like to think that I and Ufford and a lot of the other people from that time have grown up. And hopefully they've learned some lessons. It's always very strange to me for people to we live in an age where the idea that admitting that you have grown and things that you've done in the past are maybe not things that you would do now is seen as some sort of weakness or hypocritical, which I would argue it's the exact opposite of that. And I think this kind of digging in and doubling down on things is a really sad way to look at the world. So for me, it's exciting to see. To me, I think of a guy like John Boyce. John Boyce is a freaking artist, man. And I remember when he was doing Progressive Boink and the dugout chat groups with the guys back in the day. He was hilarious then. He's hilarious now, but his work has evolved and gotten bigger and larger. And yeah, sometimes more mainstream, whatever mainstream means. I discussed Simmons earlier, but this is a guy that started on an AOL little sad individual sports page and got larger and larger and larger because people liked his work and wanted to share it. That seems okay to me. That seems okay. I might have done this thing differently or whatever, but at a certain level, the idea that people should grow up. If I were still acting like I was when I was 25 years old, I'm a mess. I'm the guy still going to his old frat parties or something. At a certain level, you should grow and evolve, and it's been exciting to see people do that.
Yeah, I'd argue that's the ideal situation to look back with regrets. It means you're evolving.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that I don't have pride in some of I'm proud of the work I did at Deadspin. I don't think that there are things that I don't look back and be like, oh, there was a dark time. Those things all came from a pure place. I think sometimes language is a little, we think of certain language things differently than we did then, but I also don't think that people looked at Deadspin and felt like they needed to take a shower at the end of the day, at least when I was doing it.
No, definitely not.
So, I think that I think you can evolve without necessarily And listen, it could be worse. We could be musicians, and still every time we went out to do a show, we had to play all the songs that we did from 16 years ago. Like at a certain level, I get to do different things now while still reaping the benefits of some of the renown that I was able to get from back then.
So when did you know it was time to step down and move on from Deadspin?
I would say it was a couple of things, probably two main things, one professional and one personal. The personal was a bigger one. The professional was a smaller one, which is basically Deadspin was getting bigger, and Deadspin was getting big enough that like I was starting to get pushed to bring more people on and to like expand and to do more posts and expand in different areas and so on. And that was great. I totally understood. Deadspin could not just be this guy in his apartment in Brooklyn making jokes about the Cardinals and Rick Ankiel and Woody Allen, right? So like at a certain level, I wouldn't make those jokes now, speaking of evolving things. But at a certain level, you know, I think that the site needed to grow. And there was a push, I think, from internally to have more people on the site, to expand, to start thinking more about traffic, to start thinking more about advertisers. And I was privileged enough because Deadspin had gotten big outside of that sphere of influence that I was able to hold them off longer than some other editors were able to. But I knew the barbarians were at the gates at some point. And so I knew I did not want to run a site. I knew I wanted to write. Mm-hmm. I wasn't interested in being a managing editor or a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur. I'm a writer, and that's why I started Deadspin. That's what I wanted to do. The other part of it was personal in that I remember there would be times where I would write something on Deadspin. I'd write a post, and I think it was okay. But Deadspin had become such a big community of people and such a like-minded community of people that I would write something and all the commenters would be like, yeah, well, go get him. That's right. And I get praised over. It really felt like it was starting to feel like a little bit of an echo chamber, which is fine. Everyone has their silos. I think clearly it's worse today. But it wasn't so much I had a problem with it. I like to be praised. Who doesn't like to be praised? But it was starting to realize that if I keep doing this forever, I'm gonna be the guy talking into my phone when I'm in middle age. I need to push myself. I need to do different things. I need to try writing longer form. I need to try writing more personal stuff. I need to try writing fiction. I need to try doing deeper dive investigative journalism. I loved blogging. I still love writing blog posts from time to time. I think I'm good at it. Mm-hmm. But the idea that that's all, I would just do that forever. And just have people be like, yeah, and yeah, good job, go get him. I don't want that. I want to be challenged. I want people to disagree with me. I want to try things that might fail. And it felt like as Deadspin, toward my end of my time at Deadspin, particularly after the Bissinger incident, where everything's kind of got revved up a little bit, and everyone kind of went in their corners and had their fights. I wasn't really interested in having those fights. I kind of just wanted to do my work and do the things that I cared about. And I started to realize doing those things at Deadspin there were certain expectations that as the audience got larger, that they had of the site and that they had of me. And I wasn't always interested in meeting those expectations. I wanted to try some different things and do some different things. And and also, frankly, what's the old Seinfeld thing? You want to leave while people still like you. And I think I was able to do that, particularly when you would see how things would turn over the next 4 or 5 years. I think getting out when I did was probably a good sign.
Yeah, it made a ton of sense. You were long gone at that point, but what was it like watching the end of Deadspin as we know it?
It was hard. It was 2019, so it was 14 years after it started and 11 years after I left. But I still had connections with everyone there. They certainly weren't my hires, but I've always been very. Some of the things that they did on Deadspin during the AJ era, but also particularly during the Craggs era and the Tim Marchman era and the Megan Greenwell era, and I guess the Barry Pachewski era, things I would have never even imagined doing with Deadspin. It was thrilling to me to watch them expand the canvas and try different things. Also, there's a brief moment where there was a perfect little strike zone for me when Deadspin would do something great. People would be like, oh my gosh, Will, you must be so proud to have founded this site. And then when they did something people didn't like, they'd be like, oh, this would have never happened when Will was doing that site. Right, strike zone. That's exactly what you want. So at a certain level, but what they were doing was so impressive. Some of the people like Gia Tino wrote for that site. Tom Skaka wrote for that site. Some of my favorite writers in the world wrote for that site. So it was very exciting. But, to see, once they got sold, you kind of knew it was a matter of time, particularly when those dingbats took it over. Deadspin at its core was about calling out bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what it was, and that's what it was. That was by definition what it was. So we had different ways of doing it. We had strategy of doing it, but that was the idea: was to call out bullshit. The people that ran that site, that bought that site, they never wanted that. They never wanted that. And Deadspin was always a little bit about biting the hand that fed you. It's that old Letterman sort of idea. Like, you got to call out the pencil necks in the pencil pushers, I guess, would be up in the executive suite. That's part of the idea. And at a certain level, you're going to find people that are humorless and don't get what they were trying to do there. So it was really sad to watch, but I mean, they went out in the best possible way, and I read Defector all the time. I think they're doing great work over there, and I think that I fortunately, after they all left, Deadspin never published again. Deadspin never published a story. It's gone from the internet. You can't find it. No one ever. It is always very funny whenever I joke about that, but whenever like the frankly, total morons in charge of that site right now will do, like, I think Fox News got mad at them recently or something. And, and it's very bizarre to like have people be like, oh, the guy that founded Deadspin, what do you have to say? Like, people ask me if I'm going to fire those guys. I was like, if only, if only. So at a certain level, I think I don't necessarily, I try to pretend it's just not happening anymore.
Yeah, I was going to ask. It's still technically limping along. When is the last time you actually went to Deadspin.com?
Oh my gosh. It's been, I think in the first week when they were publishing that, they were still trying to keep it together when the whole staff, there was a certain rubbernecking thing of it. It took me like 6 months to just stop automatically putting it in my window, typing it in my window. I think it also speaks to the time. Look how much we've happened in 2019. When's the last time, like, I don't know how, like, I feel like we get our news from so many different ways. I'm still so old school that I will like type in The Atlantic or The Athletic or nytimes.com. But like, I still do that, but nobody does that anymore. No. But like in 2019, people still did that. People would type in Deadspin just to see what was up, what they missed while they were working for the last couple hours. And so it took me a while to wean myself off doing that. But once I did that, now I just try to pretend it's not there. I try to pretend. And listen, that's also part of the problem too. Like I joke about this, but they just got the crappy, horrible thing that is Deadspin right now. Just got in a fight with Greg Gutfeld, who hosts a show on Fox News. I've actually known Greg for years and years and years. I was the first guest on his old show, Red Eye. Don't necessarily agree with much of what he's doing on his show right now, but like, and I think it speaks to the idea of like at a certain level, he knows that this is not Deadspin. He knows it's not Deadspin. Anyone that was around there knows it's not Deadspin. But if there's culture war points to be scored, you got to feed the animals. And so I think that like every once in a while, it's always kind of funny to I'll go on and be like, oh my God, what did those idiots do? What did those idiots do? And but fortunately, hopefully, I'm assuming pretty soon it's just going to all be written by robots. And so hopefully by then they will know that it's definitely not.
Okay, perfect. So you're clearly juggling a million different things. We haven't touched on plenty of them, including 3 different podcasts. I'm getting overwhelmed just talking about it. So I have to ask, do you have any time management tricks?
I am heavily organized. That's kind of my whole deal. I actually have a steno pad. Speaking of being old school, I literally have a steno pad it's called Shit to Get Done. I update it every day, every morning. All the stuff I have to do for that week. And I'm super, super organized. I literally just check it off when I'm done with something. And for me, it's time management. Like I would argue being productive is like, it's just time management. I'm just organized and I hit my deadlines. I turn things in on time. We talked about my novels. I have another novel due in Memorial Day, and I'm still writing for New York Magazine. I'm still doing my Major League Baseball stuff, and I'm still freelancing a lot of places. And I'm hosting these podcasts, but I also have to fit in time to write a book in that time. And so for me, the way I do it is I just literally mark out, you have this many words that you have to do a week, and I will literally go into my calendar and coffee shop 3 to 5 until my kid gets home from school. Like it is a matter of organization. It's really like, it's a matter of, I like to pretend that I have like this really mean, almost dominatrix-esque editor who it will just whip the living shit out of me if I don't turn everything in on time. It just turns out that it's me. I have to turn in all those things on time. And so I always joke, I once turned in my last book. I turned it in to my editor a week early. Wow. And he said, well, literally only 2 people have ever turned in their book early to me on time. You and John Daly. And he had not read it. So I feel like it really is just a matter of organization. Like, listen, this is, I don't know. I mean, it's fun, man. Like, this is the fun stuff to do. I don't know why, if I would definitely have a hard time getting everything done if I didn't like it. Like, this is the fun thing. I'm again, as someone approaching middle age, I don't have that much time. Like, eventually I'm going to have to slow down. So I might as well do what I can and make stuff while I can, as much as I can. So for me, my time management is just literally, I try to do this with my kids. I'm like, you have a test Thursday, write in your notebook. They're like, a notebook, right? Pen. And I'm like, yeah. These are real things, I promise. But like, literally just write in the notebook, take test, and then mark it off. You'll feel great when you're done with it. You'll worked up to it. You'll have it over with, and it'll feel like an accomplishment. And I am very anal retentive about my time. I'm often very annoying to like other parents, often to, frankly, my family sometimes, with the idea of that, like, this is when this has to be done. This is when we have to be there. We are going to be there early because my time is valuable. Their time is valuable, and everyone's time should be valuable because I have a lot to do, and I want to get it done because it's amazing that I get to do any of this. I want to do as much as I can because eventually I'm going to be dead. And one of my favorite stories on this is I save all my old clips, and all of these things are so important to me. I hang on to everything. I have every magazine I've been published in. I have PDFs and hard copies of everything I've written. I keep it all. I live in a house now. I'm not in an apartment in New York anymore, so I can put it in the basement in boxes. And one time my wife's like, when you die, we're just burning. And I was like, no, give it to the official library. She's like, yeah, there's going to be one of those. So I understand that at a certain level that I'm a lot of this I'm really just doing for me rather than posterity, but I want to keep making stuff, and for me to do it, I have to be super organized to be able to do.
Well, it's working for you, and it's a lot. If someone wants to keep up with all of it, what's the best way? Is it your newsletter?
Probably the newsletter. I read it. In addition to all this, I read a really long weekly newsletter that's free on Saturday afternoons. That started Saturday mornings. It started out as a way because I write for so many different places. I produce podcasts. I used to have a TV. If you go to YouTube, you can find all my old Sports Illustrated TV shows. I had a show called The Will Leitch Show. It was watched by, I swear, at one time up to a dozen people. But you can like when I would do all of these things, they were all over the place, and I didn't really like. Not really comfortable. Like, I don't really like Twitter very much. So I was just like, you know what? Here's a place where you can just find all the stuff that I make, and I'll write like a little intro for it next week. That intro now has become like a 3,000 word essay that I write every Saturday. So that's at William F. Leitch, LEITCH.substack.com. It comes out every Saturday morning. It's got links to everything that I wrote, has the original essay, has my playlist. That's probably the best way to do it. I'm really bad at social media. I'm currently getting yelled at something I wrote on social media right now. And I just want to know, if you're angry about the thing that I wrote and you're yelling at me at social media, I'm never going to see it. I'm never going to see it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. By all means, if it makes you feel better, you should definitely do it. I am not saying it's even worthless. If it gives you that kind of endorphin rush of yelling at someone, which is a thing, that's why I watch sports, for crying out loud. If it gives you that, do it. But you should just know that I will never see it.
All right, let's speed run through our dumb questions we ask everybody.
Yes,
tab check. How many tabs do you have open right now?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, counting this one. But all the other 8 are all stories that I am going to be reading at the end of the night. Because the days of RSS are gone. So I just have to actually just keep the window open, and I can just knock them off as I read them. There's a piece about the movie All of Us Strangers. There's a Joe Klein piece about Trump. There is what's this piece? This is it's a piece from Matt Bai about social media companies not being public utilities. And there's a Bernie Miklasz column about the Cardinals. Those are all things I'm excited to read later. I just, we'll get to at the end.
And do you do that every night? You close all the tabs?
Every time I read one, I close it down. And unfortunately, but while that happens, I will go. Also, another thing you should know, I keep an email box 0 Every time I see someone with those like 57,000 email box, I literally am 0 at the end of every night and have been since the Deadspin days. I am a firm email box 0. I'm also a bad texter. I still email. I'm still the old man that uses email, but that's how I get all the reading done. And that's how I find everything. But I'm an email box 0. If you have, I respond to everyone. I feel like I owe that to people. So I'm an email box 0. At the end of the night, the mailbox is at 0. That's my number one rule.
Incredible. Kind of serial killer-esque, but that's fine.
Oh, there's no question about that. There's no question.
All right. When you open your social media apps, what are the algorithms feeding you right now?
Right now, a lot of Illinois basketball stuff, and a lot of stuff about the darker thing. There was recently a murder here in Athens involving a college student, and I wrote about it. And so it's definitely feeding me that right now. So I'm going to try to move toward the Illinois basketball. Spring training will be coming up soon. The Oscars are coming up soon, so it will feed me a lot of Oscar stuff, a lot of movie stuff, and a lot. But right now, I would say almost all my social media usage involves the Illinois basketball team. Wow. That's about all I see right now.
Favorite accounts to follow on social media? Is it all Illini?
I am definitely a specialist. I am no longer a Twitter, like get on and just scroll person. I would say I probably use Instagram more than anything else. But because I feel like it still just seems friendlier. I don't know why, but it does. But for what I do on Twitter, and my kind of hack on Twitter for the people that are still on, is I'll find like Derek Gould, who covers the Cardinals for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I get alerts. Alerts when he posts something, so I can go see it. But that way I don't have to scroll, because I'm not going to be able to find everything. If I find someone, I don't have that for like my friends. I literally have it for like the Illinois beat reporters and like a political reporter who just Zach Lowe, for example, on ESPN. He doesn't really tweet a lot, but when he does, it's usually a link to something he's done. And Zach Lowe is a genius, so I don't want to miss anything that he makes. So I actually still use social media mostly as I use it for two things. One, as an RSS feed or a Google Reader, and another also to yell about my sports teams. I do that a lot. That's the one way I use it for its intended purpose.
RIP Google Reader. I am still mourning it. What is a corner of the internet people might be surprised you're interested in?
So I'm obsessed with the game Out of the Park Baseball. It is a baseball simulation game that I have. That you basically, I'm the Cardinals, of course. I'm in like 2038. I've created my teams, and Jordan Walker's been there the whole time because I love him. That is my gift to myself when I like finish a story or I hit a deadline. I will like play a game and kind of reward that. And so I found the community of people that are also obsessed with the game and all the little tricks and hacks. That is my alt.net.tarantino for today. It's finding the out of the park baseball nerds like me and kind of going down rabbit holes with it.
What is the last thing that truly made you laugh online?
It is one of my favorite tweets of all time. It's from 2013 and I forgot it. And I came across it the other day and it made me laugh so hard. Patricia Lockwood's a wonderful author. She's very, very funny. She wrote a great book last year whose name I currently forgotten, but I'm going to find it. So allow me to start over and say it. She wrote a great book last year called No One Is Talking About This. And she's a wonderful writer, but she's great on social media. And she wrote one of my favorite tweets of all time. She's not a sports fan, not a big sports fan, but she said, to me, watching sports is like watching a bunch of steaks who came to life and are trying violently to put themselves back together into a cow. That absolutely kills me. That absolutely kills me. I can't watch a game now without thinking, oh my gosh, it's meat trying to build itself back into a cow. It's stuck in my brain. I laugh about it every single time I think about
it. God, that's almost too perfect.
It's like incredible.
That tweet might be my answer to this next question, but what is your most scarring moment on the internet, if you can bring yourself to disclose it?
I would, scarring moment on the internet, I would say that I once wrote a piece when I was in middle school. It became our school board fired my scholastic ball coach. And it was very obvious to me and my fellow members of the team that it was because he was gay. You know, we were in a very small town, and so I went up and gave a very impassioned speech to the school board, saying, I think we all know why this is happening. And I was very fired up. And so I wrote about that years later, about like this formative experience. And the teacher found me on Facebook. He's like, oh, that was so nice. I'm not gay, though. I was never gay. I actually got fired for entirely different reasons that had nothing to do with that. That was bad. I was like, oh, right. I didn't name him, so that was good. That was good. But yeah, that was definitely a mortifying moment. Right. Oh, I know. I was talking about another teacher. I was talking about a different teacher. Obviously, sir. That's my most mortifying moment.
Man, that's a tough one.
Yeah,
how do you pry yourself away from devices or log off? Any special tactics that might be helpful to others?
Yes, I use an app called the Freedom app. I cannot recommend this app enough. It literally shuts down your internet. It's called Freedom. It is loaded onto my computer. You can do it. You can pick the sites you do it. I actually just shut down everything other than Microsoft Word, which is where I write everything. And I will just literally just shut it down. If I know I'm going to have to do some research, basically I can't do it if I'm writing my New York Magazine column because that requires research and stats and figures. But if I'm working on my novel, I will literally say, go to the Freedom app and shut everything off for like an hour and a half. And my computer becomes like a typewriter or like a word processor like it was back in the day. And I'm able to, so I'll look up, I'm like, holy crap, I just wrote like 1,500 words in like 45 minutes because I wasn't looking at anything. And I find it peaceful to do as well.
God, this looks fantastic. I'm going to install this.
It's great. It's great. And be careful with it because I always have to be careful. I'm always afraid that, like, I wrote a piece about Barstool one time for New York Magazine. I would argue it was fair. They would argue it was a hit piece. I would say it was fair. But it got posted right before I went into a 2.5-hour movie screening. And so when I came out, you can imagine what my phone looked like. And so I always had this a little bit of a fear. At the same time, I go to a long movie. I would see Oppenheimer, and I came out. I was like, all right, what exploded? So I feel like a little bit when you put on the Freedom app, you load up and just make sure that like you're like no one's trying to murder you online just yet.
It's more than fair. Where would you be without the internet?
I would like to say the funny answer is say, oh, so much peaceful. I'd be like in the woods somewhere, but I wouldn't, right? Like the web is the central, like, it's like everything else, it's Chuck Klosterman wrote a great piece about this at the end of his book, Eating the Dinosaur, where he's talking about the Unabomber and talked about the idea, like basically the Unabomber's manifesto was about against technology and how the Unabomber was bad and killed people. He's a terrible person. And his manifesto was bad. But there are arguments he makes in there about the creep of technology that I think have some value and I think have been kind of played out a little bit. But sorry, this is the way it is, man, and I'm not stopping, And so I think at a certain level, I think if you as much as it is bad, as much as I'm sure I get off of this, the people that have been yelling at me all day will continue to be yelling at me. I wouldn't have a career without it, and I wouldn't have the freedom without it. So I'd be worse off. I'd probably be writing for. I probably would be like covering the Cardinals for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and always dreaming of maybe someday being able to do more while also feeling like I had the coolest job in the world, which is basically how I feel now, actually. I feel like I can do whatever I want and I have all this freedom, but I should still be doing more. So maybe that's just my eternal curse, internet or otherwise.
Okay, well, if that did happen, what is the one thing you would save from the internet?
If I could save one thing from the internet, I would save the ability to listen to a Cardinals game while like walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. It feels like, I feel like this is something I remember when I first got when MLB Advanced Media first came out, and I was like barely had a pot to piss in. I was living in New York and I was like, wait, I can listen to Mike Shannon call a Cardinals game while walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. It felt like magic. It felt like space. Like it felt incredible that you could do that. So I would want to be able to make sure that I could still, catch the Cardinals and my favorite sports teams from anywhere on the planet. I want to make sure that continues to happen.
All right. I love it. All right. Thank you, Will, for this discussion and for your contributions to the internet. This is Ryan Perry saying, log off. The internet will still be there when you get back.